Still talking about the non-oil sector, about 5 million new taxpayers have been added to the tax base since 2016, and tax revenue increased to 1.17 trillion naira in the first quarter of 2018, which is a 51% increase from the first quarter of 2017.
That's right, Joy. And for inflation, the rate has fallen for the 15th consecutive month, while the nation's external reserves are at their highest levels in 5 years, currently double the size as it was in October 2016.
The capital market has also recovered and growing significantly as Nigeria's stock market ended in 2017 as one of the best performing in the world, with returns of about 40%.
All right, now the numbers are many, as Joy you would know, but the data also by the National Bureau of Statistics continue to indicate that, of course, the numbers will significantly improve going forward. And the Nigerian economy, according to it, currently maintains a strong growth trend, with aggregate GDP put at some 28.5 trillion naira, compared, for instance, to what we had at 26.03 trillion naira recorded in the first quarter of 2017.
And so this morning we shall unravel the numbers as we engage economic experts on the Nigerian economy under President Buhari's watch. This is Good Morning Nigeria here on the Nigerian Television Authority, Africa's largest television network. I am Joy Osiago.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Joy in also welcoming you to the program, in the course of which we shall have our regular companion segments, and those include newspaper review, business, foreign, and of course, sports. What a busy weekend it was, and a glorious one for Real Madrid, after they saw off the hard-fighting Liverpool 3-1 to lift the European Champions League for the third consecutive time. Kudos to Real Madrid. But in the meantime, let's join our colleague Anne Jibuno with the morning news. Hi, Anne, did you watch the match?
Yes, I did, Kingsley. Good morning, and Joy, good morning. Good morning. Here is the day's news. Yesterday was Children's Day, a day set aside by the United Nations General Assembly in 1954 to encourage countries to initiate actions that benefit and promote the welfare of children. In Abuja, the day was an opportunity to re-examine the responsibility of the parents, the society and the government to the development of the child against the backdrop of this year's theme, which is creating safe places for children, a collective responsibility.
If the morals and values which we are supposed to know, if it is in us, then we ourselves can know where is safe for us.
Regardless of all odds, whether Christian or a Muslim, when Christian do bad, you tell him, and when Muslim do bad, you tell him.
Decisions concerning children, discussions that are important to children, need children's voices to come through, so you don't assume on their behalf.
Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari felicitated with Nigerian children on the occasion of Children's Day. The president says Children's Day affords him another opportunity to reaffirm his administration's commitment to the protection of children, which is a day to reflect on parents' roles and responsibilities as leaders towards their children, and also assessing how far they have fared in this regard. President Buhari noted that one of the cardinal objectives of this administration is the provision of quality education for children as a fundamental foundation of economic and social development. In this regard, he says he is pleased that this administration has recorded measurable success in the homegrown school feeding program as it has continued to expand. Still on celebrating the 2018 Children's Day, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo says he's convinced that the future of Nigeria will be extremely bright. He says the conviction is born out of the great value embedded in the Nigerian children who are the future of the country. This was after attending the Sunday service at the Villa Chapel dedicated to celebrating the Nigerian child.
I'm really convinced that our nation's future is extremely bright because of all of the children that God has given us, the talents He's given us, the creativity He has given us. It's also a moment to reflect on the responsibility that we have as government, as adults, to ensure that we give these children the very best that we can, especially the children of those who cannot afford education, healthcare, and all of that.
Well, ahead of the Democracy Day celebration, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has advised Nigerians to be hopeful and make progress with every new day. He was speaking at the 2018 Democracy Day Interdenominational Church Service in Abuja.
Who it is in the journey of nation building and development. Our own nation is no different. We're on a journey from the past. There have been times when the journey is somewhat tough, difficult, and even fearful. We look behind us and we see the armies of the past, the armies of division which led to a civil war where millions died, the armies of religious strife that refused to leave us, the armies of corruption and graft, those who want us to remain in the captivity of ethnic and religious conflicts. We see the armies of the past.
And President Muhammadu Buhari has assured the Nigerian governors' wives of his full support as they compliment their husbands in improving the living standards of Nigerians, especially women and children. The president stated this when he granted audience to the 36 state governors' wives at the presidential villa, Abuja. Muslims have been admonished to imbibe the teachings of Ramadan, which inculcate patience and honesty while undertaking their daily activities for a better and prosperous society. This was disclosed at the 2018 annual Ramadan lecture hosted by the wife of the president, Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, in the spirit of the month of Ramadan.
Couples need to be honest to themselves. They need to be truthful to themselves. And Ramadan teaches us to be honest and to be truthful. So if Ramadan teaches you about honesty, you should carry that honesty that you learn from Ramadan and try to make use of it and apply it in the way you relate to yourselves, even in your matrimonial life.
Now, following more clamor by Nigerians in the diaspora to be part of the Nigerian economy and attract more funds to the country, a Diaspora Investment Summit will soon be organized. The Senior Special Assistant to the President on Diaspora and Foreign Affairs, Abike Dabiri-Erewa, said this when she met with the members of the Nigerian Diaspora Alumni Network in Abuja.
So if we can organize this investment summit and attract investors, Nigerian investors who are all over the world, to come and add something, come and invest in something in Nigeria, all the sectors are available. We can always do better. We can improve, and we're responsible for our own country.
We're going to work with you to have a very, very successful Nigeria Diaspora Investment Summit, which will be put together by diaspora groups to work with the Nigerian government to ensure that every Nigerian who is interested in Nigeria will invest in Nigeria.
That's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Joy and Kingsley after this break.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem frontally through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Reorganized, trained, and fully equipped, We are the new improved Nigeria Police Force. We fight crime. We bust syndicates. Whatever the crime, wherever the hideout, the Nigeria Police Force will get you busted. Stop kidnapping, armed robbery, murder, pipeline vandalism and other criminal activities. Be productive. Be security conscious. Join the police force to secure your life and property. This message is from the Nigeria Police Force Public Relations Department.
Rap has changed, music has evolved, new art forms and genres are riding in the airwaves.
I'm just another OG caught up in the mix. I'm trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. I won't be left with nothing but take you back to school. Yeah.
Hey, listen up, black and yellow old pals.
Rivalry between the old musicians and the new ones.
You say you don't know Lemmy Patterson?
What time don't pass? I mean, none of us here knows you. You don't even know me, Roy Zinger. Which kind of music would I play?
Oh, baby, oh, baby, oh, baby.
If a musician can be old, can music be old? Join your retracking comedy in this explosive episode called Hip Life.
You two guys us.
You should get out of here.
You don't belong to the 80s. That's who you are.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network. Glow Unlimited.
Helen! Your kitchen gets 10 out of 10.
Thank you.
This also gets a 10. Should we see the toilet now?
Sure.
This gets just 1.
It is clean.
But not perfect 10.
Better than my detergent and bleach? Impossible.
Challenge? Try the new Apic 10X.
Compared to bleach and detergent, Apic sticker formulation removes yellow stains times better, giving you a sparkling clean toilet.
Wow.
Now you also take that
Apic 10X challenge.
Also available in 200 ml pack.
Whenever pain occurs, you want quick relief. Try new Nurofen Express. It goes to the source of pain and gets to work in under 15 minutes. That's why Nurofen Express delivers fast and effective relief. New Nurofen Express works at the source of pain. Fast.
Being a mom is great, but when your child has a fever, you don't know what to do. I trust Nurofen for Children to take care of my child's pain and fever.
Effective relief you can trust.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the daring and invincible Louis the Mosquito. Responsible for 200 malaria cases all on its own. Is there anything that can kill Louis? Morphine! Presenting Mortine Power Guard. Its powerful formula kills malaria mosquitoes fast. So, get Mortine Power Guard.
Every day, I see patients who come to me suffering from infectious diseases caused by germs, from typhoid to diarrhea, flu, cough. An average human being comes in contact with over 1 million germs daily when we use the toilet, from our door handles, from other surfaces, we transfer to others without realizing. That is why we recommend Dettol Antiseptic Liquid. Protect your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol Sure.
Thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. Let's now take our business news with Joy Uzo.
A warm welcome to Business News. The presidency has released its economic achievements within the past 3 years in commemoration of Democracy Day celebration holding tomorrow. In the document made available to the media, it specifically says that the Nigerian economy is on the path of growth after recovering from the recession of 2016 to 2017. It said the Buhari administration's priority sectors of agriculture and solid minerals maintained consistent growth throughout the recession. The document says inflation has fallen for the 15th consecutive month, while the nation's external reserves are at their highest levels in 5 years. Moving on now, the Indonesian government has said it will increase its trade relations with Nigeria under a win-win situation where both sides benefit. Indonesian ambassador to Nigeria, Aripuwanto, disclosed this to NTA Business News while giving an update on the outcome of the Indonesian African Forum held last month in Bali, Indonesia. Until the Nigeria's Apex Bank, the Central Bank of Nigeria, has rolled out fresh measures to improve foreign exchange liquidity and ensure that eligible travelers are able to access foreign currency. A statement by the Apex Bank's Acting Director of Corporate Communications, Mr. Isaac Okarafo, made available to the media, said all deposit money banks had been mandated to buy and sell foreign currency to travelers upon presentation of relevant valid travel documents, adding that all travelers would be attended to immediately at the bank's counters. On that note, we'll wrap up business news. Many thanks for watching. I am Joy Uzo.
Thank you very much, Joy Uzo, for the business news on Good Morning Nigeria. Next for us now, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyebi, is in the studio. Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning, Joy. Good morning, Kinsley.
Bayo, good to see you. I hope you enjoyed your weekend.
Yes, very restful.
All right. Okay, let's begin with the Punch newspaper. Punch newspaper has a front page story. Of course, that's the lead story. And then below that, you have photographs from the Children's Day celebration in different parts of the country yesterday. That's the photograph there from Abuja, Lagos, Bauchi, and Enugu. And the headline says, Akeredolu Okowa and Obiano seek end to child abuse. That's in respect of the Children's Day celebration. And still on the Children's Day celebration, let's look at a photograph from the Nigerian Tribune. The Tribune has a photograph on its front page, and the photograph is that of the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, with some children at the Abagana internally displaced persons camp in Benue State. That was to mark the Children's Day yesterday. That's for, then you have a headline there that's beside the photograph. Nigerians decry violence against children, seek improved welfare. That story is on page 30. Now, to some political stories. You have a number of them on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune before we return to the Punch. Below the nameplates of the Nigerian Tribune, Democracy Day, that's the kicker. PDP, APC tackle each other. Don't bother to address Nigerians, PDP tells Buhari. Nigerians not in a hurry to forgive PDP's years of looting. That's according to APC. Details of that story on page 8. Buhari can't win 2019 without us. That's according to NPDP. It says we are not begging presidency for attention to meet Oshibajo today. Nigerian Elders Forum birth says nation in grave danger. Now, the late story for the Tribune is right there with 3 riders. Presidency hits Obasanjo again. Recalls how Plateau, Oyo, Ekiti, and Anambra governors were removed under him. And Lai Mohammed reels out Buhari's achievements, says Nigeria has risen from ashes of misgovernance. There is hunger in the land, Anglican primate tells Buhari. And Benga Daniel to emerge Atiku campaign director general. Details of that, page 37.
Now let's go quickly to the Daily Sun. It comes with a lead story which starts with a kicker. Last-ditch effort to resolve APC crisis. Buhari steps into NPDP crisis. And the writer there says, now to meet aggrieved members after Oshibajo's preliminary intervention. You can get details of that story on page 6. And beside the name plate there is the story. South governors demand 13% derivation on withdrawn $1 billion. Rivers, Bayelsa, Delta want oil-producing states shares. Details on page 8. And moving down below the lead story is a picture story there with internally displaced persons displaying school bags and instructional materials received from United Nations Children's Fund at IDP's camp in Maiduguri, Borno State. And to the right of the picture, 2019 APC deserves to return, and that comment is attributed to Kal. You can get details of the story on page 8. Anglican primate to federal government, Nigerians starving. The story is also on page 8. And below that, I'm committed to protecting children, says President Muhammadu Buhari. And it comes with one rider. APC has done well. And that is attributed to Lai Mohammed. Let's go quickly to The Guardian for the lead story. We've done so much with so little, government insists. And it comes with two riders. How CBN revived economy under current administration. And opposition rejects President Buhari's APC claims. Bayo.
Yes. Well, the talk of the nation is Children's Day celebration. And the president charged families, security agencies, traditional rulers, and all religious leaders, as well as civil and right groups, to help our society by rising to take up the challenge, to step up unacceptable rising cases of violence against children, to fight it to all extent. The president says that our children are our future, and therefore the initiative that come from the points of confidence of our country is the bright future of our children. And that is why his administration is embarked on the homegrown program, which has taken root in 24 states, and about 8.2 million children are benefiting from the Meal a Day program. He says that for the economic and social development of our children, the quality education is very germane. He particularly made the reminiscence of 3 children, one a 3-year-old who sent him a get well message while he was on medical vacation, another 10-year-old who described his affection for the president, and a 12-year-old who saved from his lunch and pocket allowances to contribute to the president's campaign. The president says that we owe it a duty to develop our children if we are looking forward to our future. There was a church service in commemoration of the Children's Day, and Vice President Professor Yomi Osinbajo said the day was a day to reflect on the responsibility of government and all the duties to ensure that we give these children the best we can. That is why government is taking an approach, what he described as a bottom of the pyramid, to help ensure that children get very high and quality education.
All right, Bayo, those are the stories that we have already from the papers. But let's return to the Punch. Punch, very quickly, again, the other stories on politics, apart from the photographs on the Children's Day celebration. Lead story is still similar to what we have for the Tribune. Obasanjo government used police and DSS to topple governance. That's according to the presidency. Details of that story can be found on page 12. Now, an earpiece there says Northern and Southern leaders to form Nigerian Elders Forum. And that's on page 12. Above the nameplate, we shouldn't have post-budget fight with Buhari. That's according to reps. And we won't vote for religious bigots in 2019, Methodist prelate. So that's, don't ask for a return to the past. Osinbajo warns Nigerians. That story can be found on page 2 of the Tribune. And then right at the foot of the front page of the Punch newspaper, you have other headlines there. Poor internet services loom as ISPs fail to renew licenses. An inquiry blames drunken husband for Abuja triplets mother's death. That's on page 8.
Let's for a bit on Children's Day from The Guardian. At the foot of the paper there, the front page, we have Osinbajo at Children's Day service preaches hope. And if you turn to page 8 of the same paper, we also have another story. It says Saraki celebrates with IDPs in Benue, pledges to check killings.
All right, Bayo, so let's...
yes. Let's talk about the aspect of the budget. The executive now is now scrutinizing the budget, having had it passed on to the executive arm of government. The increase in the National Assembly has been a matter of concern. However, there are indications that both the executive and the legislature agreed about the increase because oil benchmark, which was placed at $45 per barrel, had gone up to 51. So they decided what to do with it. The contention, however, was that while one arm of government wanted it to be deployed to deficit, the other ones wanted it to be used for other developmental projects. But over the weekend, former Minister of Finance and Coordinator of the Economy in the President Goodluck Jonathan administration says that there were arm twisting and characterized by blackmail in raising the budget, particularly that of budget 2015. He said that the members of the National Assembly, particularly the leaders, forced the executive arm to part with 17 billion naira in the budget. He revealed that in her book, Fighting Corruption, a dangerous story behind the headlines. The former Minister for Finance and the coordinator of the economy said the 17 billion was besides the 150 billion annual standard budget of the National Assembly. She described the federal legislators as a tough political group to deal with. However, latest clarification published in the newspaper is indicating that the 17 billion, which was added to the 2015 budget, was not a bribe.
All right, Bayo, thank you very much. Just before we take the editorial, but let's go. There's a metro section of the Punch newspaper on pages 4 and 5. The metro, there's a number of interesting stories there, but of course, we'll just take the headline of one. It said, crisis as workers fault Osun Poly Rector's doctorate. We don't have record of him. That's according to University of Ibadan. And the other one says, I'm ready to present my UI certificate. It says rector. That's for the PhD. But the story there of greater interest is the one on page 5. If you can zoom in on that on page 5, the story is General allegedly threatens EKEDC worker with gun. And this happened in Ikoyi, Lagos. That a retired army general allegedly pulled a gun and threatened to shoot some workers of the Eco Electricity Distribution Company. They had disconnected his power on account that he had not paid his bills. And of course, the report indicated that while the disconnection crew was still in the neighborhood, this is on Lugard Avenue, the general drove in a Toyota car, waylaid the crew, brought out a loaded pistol and shot into the air. The crew members were forced to reconnect the general's house since he threatened that he would shoot the leader of the team if his house was not reconnected.
It's a very sad development. I think it is a pronouncement by the police high command for that all firearms are supposed to be surrendered to the police high command across the nation. It's part of the mopping up of arms. I don't know whether it applies to retired generals and they are allowed to hold on to their former service pistols. But that development is very threatening. There is a corollary to that. It's a trend, a pronouncement in the social media, which is trending, that power generating companies do not have a right to disconnect you except and only if they give you a 3 months notice. And this is also causing a lot of consternation across the nation.
You mean power distribution companies?
Yes.
Yeah, power distribution companies. Well, there are all kinds of ideas, but to the specific one of the report of the general,
yes,
the disconnection, the first question to ask is, what kind of meter does he have? Is he being given estimated billing? This is part of the frustration that consumers, of course, have to endure. I'm sure that in most parts of the coal distribution area, people by now should have prepaid meters. But that's one particular instance. And then the idea of climbing the electric pole, to disconnect power supply to a debtor consumer is one that is probably more common in some other parts of the metropolis than on Lugard Avenue in Ikoyi. So, about what you just raised now with regard to adequate notice before disconnection, I think that's a matter that one will have to look into in terms of further research. Let's take the editorial, which is from the Blueprint newspaper. It's on page 11. That's Blueprint newspaper. And it says, disturbing forced kid labor trend. That's child labor, once again, that is in focus. And it says the editorial is observing that a study published by the ILO, that's the United Nations International Labour Organization, indicates that resources are needed to tackle the problems, but unfortunately, the problems far exceed the funding by domestic governments.
Well, it's a worldwide program. The International Labour Organization identified about 152 million children within the age bracket of 1 to 10 are victims of forced labor. And it also says that about 73 million embark on hazardous labor every day. And this, coming back to Nigeria, there are about 10 million Nigerian children who are out of school. And several state governments have put in place a compulsory and free primary education. Yet, across the states, you still find children not going to school. So the editorial is harping on the fact that if Nigeria is to achieve our objective of meeting the target of the sustainable development, which is 8.7% by the year 2025, then there must be serious efforts to eradicate this forced labor, particularly children. An interesting thing, there was a development about the Children's Day celebration in Abuja. The children in Abuja specifically requested that government should provide a law that stops children from hawking during school hours.
All right, Bayo, that's very interesting. That's the much that we can take. If you recall, Bayo, last week when there was a story from Gombe about the
maize?
About the maize. And of course, you said maybe by now the legislature should be contemplating taking out insurance policies for their maize. There is a photograph on page 21. We are scrambling to get that on the screen, if we can. Blueprint indicating that the Gombe State Commissioner of Police has recovered the stolen maize and is presenting it. That's what the photograph is indicating to the Speaker of the Gombe House of Assembly. Of course, unfortunately, I mean, we can't get that on the screen, but it's on page 21 of the Blueprint newspaper. That's where you have the photograph. The maize has been recovered.
Did it indicate from who it was recovered?
Well, I wouldn't know. It's not stated there.
Greater details in the paper.
It's a photo story only. Yes, it's a photo story only that we have. But if we do get it before we sign off Bayo, that will be fair enough. I mean, nobody has told us who picked up the maize from the National Assembly. That's the Senate in particular as well.
One that happened in Abuja, a good Samaritan called the attention of the police where it was lying very close to the National Stadium.
Absolutely. Bayo, that's the much that we can take. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, as always.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria still. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be assessing 3 years of the Buhari administration economic performance.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There's no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Oh boy, climb this thing now. Not be only to connect lights. Come you and yourself now. Now wow. Oh boy, come down now. Oga Kasali electrician who would they look for with this? Oh, Oga Kasali, come help us fix this wire now.
Sorry, I no longer carry out illegal connection. It puts the lives of people at risk and can cause fire outbreak and disrupt power supply. I will never be part of anything that has to do with this any longer because change begins with me.
Oh boy, what you mean talk makes sense? Oh boy, we could carry this ladder from over.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Brought us as usual.
As usual. You have no problem.
For the three put
you are welcome, sir.
As usual, yeah?
Welcome.
You take that one.
Yeah, take that one.
You don't understand? We want Nigerian homegrown rice. Finish. You don't have? You don't have?
Join the rice revolution today.
No other rice that tastes like Nigerian rice. Are you sorry? That's not the Nigerian rice we are talking about. Chocolate made in Nigerian rice. Healthy food. I'm going to bring Mrs. Mobu to come to chocolate rice of made in Nigeria here. And see how it are made.
Correct.
And how they are cook it.
Correct.
Homegrown rice are good for your health. It will boost our economy and will give employment to our people.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The NTA Television College JOS admission forms for diploma program in film and television production, television engineering technology, broadcast journalism, and degree programs in mass communication, television journalism, and mass communication television production is now on sale. The sale of forms will commence 14th May and run to 13th August 2018 at the cost of 7,500 Naira only per form, payable through the remitter platform in favor of NTA Television College JOS. Forms can be obtained from all marketing offices in NTA State Capital Stations, zonal centers, Training Directorate of the NTA Headquarters Abuja, and the Office of the Academic Secretary of the NTA Television College. Applicants are required to possess 5 credits in GCE, SSCE in relevant areas of study, including English and mathematics, in not more than 2 sittings. All completed forms attached with photocopies of credentials must be submitted on or before the 13th of August 2018 to the stations where the forms were obtained. For further inquiries, please contact the Office of the Academic Secretary on these numbers. Announcer, Registrar.
The Nigerian economy has witnessed steady recovery since the recession that kicked in shortly after President Buhari assumed office. Now, to set the tone for our discussion this morning as we examine the economic landmarks of the Buhari administration, here is correspondent Mitaire Ikpen with this background report.
The Nigerian economy in the last 3 years under President Muhammadu Buhari has been quite resilient, thriving and overcoming a harsh recession. According to the latest indices by the National Bureau of Statistics, the Nigerian economy currently maintains a strong growth trend with aggregate GDP put at about 28.5 trillion naira compared with about 26.03 trillion naira recorded in the first quarter of 2017. Meanwhile, real GDP has grown by 1.92% by the fourth quarter of 2017. Analysts attribute the resilience of the economy to the implementation of well-thought-out economic policies by the Buhari administration, especially in the non-oil sectors. In the agricultural sector, for instance, the government's support of local rice production has boosted Nigeria's self-sufficiency in the commodity to over 15 million tons, while rice imports are said to have dropped by more than 90% within the last 3 years. The economic diversification policies of the Buhari administration, coupled with the recovery of oil price in the international market, has also boosted the nation's foreign reserve, which has grown from $24 billion in 2016 to $46 billion this year, about the highest in 5 years. The remarkable strides of the administration in creating the ease of doing business environment for investors earned Nigeria the World Bank's ranking as one of the top 10 most improved economies in 2017. This has greatly encouraged and attracted both local and foreign investments in the economy in the last few months. The launch of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP, has also stabilized the macroeconomic environment, improved food security, and also ensured energy efficiency, especially in power and petroleum products. With the significant economic strides recorded so far by the Buhari administration, how can the government consolidate on the gains so far achieved? What more can the government do to sustain economic diversification and growth of the non-oil sectors? These will form part of discussions by guests on Good Morning Nigeria.
All right, thank you very much, Mitaire, for that backgrounder. Now we have 2 guests with us to discuss this. Another guest, hopefully, will also join us. But the 2 guests we have often been regular guests on Good Morning Nigeria each time we are discussing aspects of the economy, especially in the 3 years that the Buhari administration has been in office. First with us here in the Abuja studios, would like to welcome again Dr. Nazif Dama, Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Abuja. Dr. Dama, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Kingsley, and good morning, Nigerians.
All right, and also joining us from our Lagos Network studios at this time, yeah, you can see him there on the right side of the split screen, is Mr. Tilewa Adebajo. He's a financial analyst. Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, pleasure to have you join us. And you're also chairman of Stationery Stores. I believe that's a football club. That's, of course, the pedigree of stores, it was said in those days. I hope you enjoyed your weekend with Real Madrid against Liverpool. Before we talk economics.
Yes, Kingsley. Good morning, Kingsley. Exciting football times. Nigeria also going to the World Cup, so there's a lot of football to look forward to. And of course, Stationery Stores is back playing in the Nigerian National League. So a lot of football, and we're also looking forward to Nigeria doing very well in the World Cup. And congratulations also to Real Madrid for winning the Champions League. Exciting finals.
That's the Adebajo Babes, that's the current chairman. Right, let's begin, of course, by taking a broad look at the economy. 3 years of the Buhari administration. We're now out of recession, but obviously, I mean, how do we put a marker on the milestones of the administration's governance of the economy in 3 years, Dr. Dama?
Well, it is really exciting for one to be a Nigerian for once. But importantly, if you look at the macroeconomic indices prior to the emergence of this administration, the recession that Nigeria has gone through and our ability to exit the recession within a reasonable period of time is an indication of remarkable strides made by the government towards putting institutional framework and structures that will strengthen better economic management and resource utilization. If you look at specific fiscal policy actions that were taken by the administration relating to the TSA, relating to the fiscal controls as to what needs to be done by the states arising from the bailout funds, the promulgation of the economic recovery and growth plan, even though I have on several occasions accused the government of not doing right, and by and large, the replenishing of the economy, particularly the massive injection of resources into agricultural sector, which has significantly improve production and reduce our import dependency as far as food is concerned, particularly rice. And then if you look at the proportionate increase in the percentage of capital spending relative to recurrent spending that we have witnessed in the last 3 years, and then the massive embarkment on infrastructural projects in the pace of the declining oil revenue. When the government assumes power, the oil prices fall to as low as $35, $38 a barrel. I think they are all indications of the seriousness on the part of the government to do what is right in a period of lean revenue. Because we have said times without number that the internal resource generation capacity of the economy, if not because we are seemingly characterized with avoidable wastages of the limited resources, despite the lower oil price and despite our dependency on a monocultural economy, that is oil, we could have done better than what we are doing. And I think the government in the last 3 years have responded by saying, yes, despite limited resources, but if you internally utilize what you have within you, perhaps you could be able to achieve more. And importantly so, the blockage of leakages on the part of institutions, particularly at the federal level, and then the strive made by the government to increase the quantum of tax revenue collected and then also reduce the leakages. I think they are all pointers to the fact that, yes, the government is serious in terms of doing what is right in order to bring more resources and then ensure efficiency in the utilization of resources. But importantly also, in the history of the country, one of the few things that has happened recently was the audit of revenue generating agencies, and then the revelations which indicate that so many of the revenue generating agencies are not remitting what is right. Perhaps it's a step in the right direction to at least reduce significantly, because realistically, though Nigeria is a developing economy and we are characterized as a poor country, but the quantum of lack of efficiency in public sector spending, if it is really reduced to the barest minimum, the positivities that we are witnessing and that we are likely to witness will have been much better than what it is. And it will also provide a very important signal for anybody that wants to partner with us as a country to come and invest his resources, whether in public-private partnerships or directly productive activities in any sector of the economy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dharma. We'll get back to you. Let's go quickly to Mr. Tilewa Adebajo in Lagos. In 2015, when this administration took over, there was so much cry about the state of the economy as we nosedived into recession. Here we are 3 years later discussing the economy. What is your take or view about where we were before and where we are today?
Good morning, Joy. Thank you very much for the question. Let me allude from what Prof has just said about the issues around the efficiency of public spending. The numbers are clear, and I think if we take a look at the key macroeconomic indicators within the last 3 years, the National Bureau of Statistics have very clear numbers. But how do we drill down to those numbers to see how things has happened? In summary, I think at the beginning of this administration, just to give you an overview, the economic growth was about 6.25%. That GDP growth was about 6.25%. That the economy then crashed and we went into a recession and we achieved a growth of negative 2.25%. And with the implementation of the Economic Recovery Growth Plan, we've seen the economy gradually come out of recession. And we closed the last quarter of 2017 with a growth of about 2.2%. But unfortunately, in the first quarter of this year, economic growth has shrunk again to about 1.9. So we've seen a contraction in GDP growth. So there's a mixed bag in terms of what we've seen in terms of economic growth. And another concern about that is the fact that our population has been growing at about 3% a year. And one of the key strengths of Nigeria is this large population, which provides a large market and large human capital to be able to realize our potential. But unfortunately, one of the most uncompromising economic indicators is the fact that your economic growth must equal or exceed your population growth. That hasn't happened for Nigeria in the last 3 years. And if we're not careful, our population is going to fast become a liability instead of becoming an asset. But having said that, let's take a look at the positives from this administration. One of the things that this administration has done over the year is to be able to restore fiscal discipline. And it's come at a cost. But I think that the trajectory on fiscal discipline is quite positive. And I think the signals that they've sent in terms of having fiscal discipline, very aggressive drive to be able to collect taxes, implementing the TSA, as Prof has alluded to, and the fact that in terms of fiscal expenditure, there is more discipline in that area in terms of blocking leakages and all those other important milestones that have been set. But even taking a look at the economic recovery growth plan, I think one of the most important things outside the fiscal policy is now aligning the fiscal policy with the monetary policy. Now, because of the challenges in the growth of the economy, we've seen a lot of tightening by the central bank. We had inflation hit a high of 18.5%, which over the last 2 years has now been brought down to about 12.5% in that area. One of the reasons why inflation was high was because of food, which Prof also alluded to. The diversification program for the government in agriculture and how they've spent a lot of investments in agricultural sector to be able to for economic diversity. But one of the challenges we've had in this country is the security situation. The internally displaced people in the north eastern part of Nigeria are actually very productive Nigerians. And unfortunately, because of the security situation in that place, they have not been able to produce the food and the crops that we normally comes into the economy. Coupled with the problems of the herdsman clashes in Benue, which is a food basket, we found that over the last 2 years, food inflation has been stubbornly high because we've not been able to at least use some of our productive capacity. But I think all in all, we're now beginning to see some alignment with both monetary and fiscal policy. I think the economic recovery growth plan is kicking in. But unfortunately, the stimulus which we require from the capital expenditure, which Prof also alluded to, we've not really seen that benefit. That has been quite slow. And that has to do with the politics of passing the budget. If we had passed our budgets earlier, then I think there would have been more release of these capital votes that can create stimulus into the economy that can sustain growth. So the economic recovery has been very fragile. And as we've seen from the first quarter, we've seen another contraction, which shows that the stimulus is not being sustained. And I think it's important now that this budget is signed into law and the capital expenditure and the various stimulus that we need to put it into that. So I think it's also important that the government has to review this economic recovery growth plan and come up with more aggressive policies, newer policies that can sustain economic growth. Because from the results of the first quarter this year, we have seen, I think, what you would call another contraction. And the trajectory on economic growth is beginning to look negative. So the government needs to intervene and react to that. But I think all in all, in terms of stabilizing the economy, I think top marks will go to the government on fiscal discipline. And those are the key areas that which we've looked at. Policies have more or less remained the same. I don't think there have been too many changes in policies. The foreign exchange regime has been difficult, but that has also been stabilized. And as we've said, the reserves are at 24 billion, now is hitting close to the $50 billion mark in the reserves. And what this means is that we should see the Naira not trading at 350, but I think the Naira should be trading anywhere between 250 and 280. Because not only do we have the reserves to back it, but the fact is that the supply and demand aspect of foreign exchange management also needs to be reviewed to reflect true market conditions.
All right, Mr. Tulewa Adebajo, thank you very much. But I still want to stay with you. I mean, we have two of you just now. One point that I would like us to elaborate on, you've touched on it in passing while giving your assessment of the administration's management of the economy. One key point you always stressed from 2015, especially in 2016, in the thick of the recession, was that the administration did not have in the public domain an economic blueprint. And therefore, the economic policy of the administration seemed unclear. Now we have the economic recovery and growth plan. But a moment ago, you were saying that in light of what we are seeing already in terms of some of the indicators, some contraction in the growth of the economy in the first quarter of 2018, there might be need to return to the economic recovery and growth plan, tinker with it, and then get it aligned, especially with the budget and so on and so forth. So my question, therefore, is as follows. We have seen out of the economic recovery and growth plan a number of other policy measures, for instance, ease of doing business, and so on and so forth. What, in your perspective, has been the knock-on effect of that economic blueprint in terms of the overall management of the economy?
I think, first of all, it sets, the economic recovery growth plan sets a roadmap to growth. And I think it's very well documented. And I think we've had that discussion on this program severally. The issue now is that with economic management, you have to monitor certain indicators. Some indicators are leading indicators and some are lagging. And if you take a look at the economic recovery growth plan, you have to work in conjunction with not only monetary policy, but you have to also work with fiscal policy. Now, I think we've commended the government on the fiscal discipline and a lot of what they're trying to do in terms of generating tax, extra additional revenue from the non-oil sources. I think that's clear. But monetary policy is also quite important. So the key players in this equation is the Minister of Trade and Investment, the Minister of Finance, and of course, the Governor of the Central Bank and the Monetary Policy Committee. You have to tweak the economy. It's something that it's constant monitoring. And, I was quite disappointed that they did not cut the rates at the last Monetary Policy Committee meeting. Because, yes, we have that framework. So what we're saying now is that dust up this economic recovery growth plan. Let us understand what has happened in the first quarter of this year and realign some of these policies and tweak them to be able to create the necessary stimulus. As I mentioned earlier, the budget that's just been passed maybe in May, 5-6 months into the year, is a big disappointment and does not give confidence to the business community. So if you have that budget passed now, and the capital expenditure from that budget is released into the economy, then we can get that stimulus. So what we're saying is that bring out the economic recovery growth plan, dust it up again. Let's understand the realities, that the fact that there has been a setback. It might be minor. First quarter, there's been a contraction. Let's tweak it and let's get the economy back on the path to growth and recovery. And I think one of the things that must be done is, I think the central bank now they have to start looking at how they're going to cut rates so that we can create some additional policies. But the financial markets have already reacted to that. Treasury bill rates have gone down from 18% to 10%. And lending rates now for corporates are about 17 to 18%. And for non-corporates, maybe in the mid-20s. So the financial markets have already reacted to the possibility of rate cuts. At the time when the treasury bills were 18%, that was not sustainable for government, because last year the government was spending close to 60% of its revenues to servicing debt. Now that has been reduced drastically from this budget to about 30%, which is more manageable and more sustainable. And as the government begins to shift a lot of its debt from local naira borrowing to foreign borrowings to make debt cheaper, then they should be able to manage the debts probably close to about 25% of revenues going into debt service. So what we're saying is the fact that let us take a look at these economic indicators. Some of them are leading, some of them are lagging indicators. The actions we take now, we might not be able to see that effect till the end of the year. So what we're saying is that this is the time for you to make certain adjustments so that by year end, we can see the economy growing at least 3%, which is the rate of our population growth. That really must be a target that is non-negotiable.
Very much, Mr. Tilewa Adebajo. We'll come back to you shortly. Let's bring in Dr. Dama here. You see, he laid so much emphasis on the economic recovery growth plan and some of the policies and the need to tweak them so that we can get in more productive policies. What's your take on that?
Well, you see, the reality is that, as I have said earlier on many outings, Nigeria is a developing economy, and it's a public sector-led economy. Investment expectations on the part of individual and corporates are significantly dependent on the direction and the timelessness with which government policies are initiated and implemented. It is quite unfortunate that the budget of 2018 is yet to be signed by Mr. President. Now, this quagmire, this delay, or this unwarranted delay, or avoidable delay, is actually a manifestation of a problem which I have said quite so much, and I will continue to repeat it. If as a nation, we have reverted back to the conception and implementation of a national development planning culture in which every single developmental intervention, sector by sector, is analyzed in a holistic manner. Believe me sincerely, this delay in budget will not have been done. The budget will have been a process of like gentleman agreement, because we will just lift what was actually agreed to by the three tiers of government in the medium-term national development plan, pass it to the National Assembly, ensure concurrence, and make minor adjustment maybe to take care of inflation, and pass the budget within less than 60 days. But we have abandoned that culture, and that is why we keep moving in cycle and this wrongly. And the reality is that the resources available at the disposal of the public sector, if you analyze it in the context or comparatively with the developmental needs and aspirations of every sector of Nigeria, you realize that the money we are spending is quite insignificant. The 26 or 27 point something billion US dollars equivalent of our 2018 budget, believe me, is so insignificant. But the government is the one that needs to do what is right. Revert back to the culture of development planning. We have Vision 2020 Economic Transformation Blueprint, which I was privileged to be part of the team, developed by over 5,800 Nigerians. And at the inception of this government, what we said is that government is a continuum. Take that Vision 2020 Economic Transformation Blueprint, revise it, because it encapsulates every single developmental need of Nigeria, including projects and programs. So revise it to 2030, align it with the Sustainable Development Goals, bring all the three tiers of government so that we stop this budget wrangling. It's really embarrassing. It's really avoidably embarrassing for an economy with 200 million people. The National Assembly and the executive will be dissipating avoidable energy over 6 months just to pass a federal budget of 27 point something billion. When comparatively, other developing economy peers like India is spending $490 billion. Indonesia is spending $160 billion. Brazil is budgeting $1,000 trillion. But a significant proportion of most of these resources is not coming from the government. It's coming from private entities through public-private partnership. Why? Because these three economies have had institutional strengthening in terms of, one, macroeconomic predictability, two, sustainability of medium-term development planning culture for a very long period of time, but importantly, policy consistency irrespective of who is in power. And that is actually what we need. Look, it is really embarrassing if you go to any market in Nigeria today. With 200 million people, a significant proportion of what I, you, and most Nigerians consume is imported. So we need to have a think. We need to have to sit down with every stakeholder, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, the elites, economists. What is the problem that we cannot significantly produce domestically what we are importing? We are taking so much resources out of this country, and there is no single economy comparatively with a similar population like ours that have this kind of extreme import dependency on what its citizens and nationals require. I think it is an embarrassment on we the elites that we need to sit down and look at it. But importantly also, despite the fact that some efforts have been made in terms of fiscal discipline, we need to also talk to ourselves as a nation that the costing structure of public sector projects in Nigeria today, as it is, whether at the federal government or at the state government or at the local government, may not be able to necessarily command or attract massive injection of private sector resources that we require in order to complement what the government is doing. So let us sit down, talk to ourselves, reduce the cost element, institutionalize the process, incorporate Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors, who are actually statutorily responsible for costing every single project and program in government, so that we will have some semblance of more additional fiscal discipline that will provide the necessary positive signals that will attract massive injection of resources, particularly public-private partnership resources in infrastructure and directly productive activities, so that the quantum of idle use that we have, over 40 million of them, despite the fact that we have so much, but we are witnessing some element of economic growth, you could imagine the leapfrog or the quantum leap that the economy is likely to have when you have massive public sector and public-private partnership injection into various sectors of the economy. We can be able to achieve 8 to 10% growth rate if the government does what is right and if we, as the elites, work as a team.
All right, Dr. Nazib Ahmad, thank you very much. Returning to Mr. Tilewa Adebajo at our Lagos Network Studios, part of what we have seen in the 3 years of the Buhari administration, again, we're backing up now into history, has been almost, as it were, in managing the nation's economy, the succor provided to a number of states that were financial basket cases by 2015, 2016 with regard to the bailout funds, whether named Pari refund or otherwise. But still, we find a number of states struggling with their debts. Some of their debts to commercial banks have been restructured or otherwise, were realigned. But salaries remain unpaid, and of course, the states continue to struggle. Can we contextualize what the Buhari administration did with regard to lending a helping hand to the indigent status of financial states, the indigent states rather of a number of the states? But is this sustainable going forward? How can the states on their own pull themselves up by the bootstraps and say, all right, now we're not going to be part of the loop of the nation's economy?
Well, I think at the time when you have an intervention, I think that's part of trying to stimulus that you create in an economy to be able to help state governments restructure their loans. I think that's a one-off thing that has been done, and most of those states, I think, have reached their lending capacity. So it's going to be very difficult for them to come back to the financial markets to be able to borrow any money, because they've reached their limits, and I think they've had, like you've said, some sort of bailout for the from the government, which was good at the time to be able to at least restore that economy and put money back into the hands of the civil servants, who can now begin to at least spend that money and create some sort of stimulus in the economy. So that was a one-off that has been done. But I think going on, I think for the subnationals, which are the state governments, I think for a lot of them it was a wake-up call. And I think it's just there's such a big diversity or big gap with states like Lagos State and Ogun State, who are quite self-sufficient in terms of very substantial IGR earnings compared to other states who are struggling with their IGR, especially states, other states in the southeast of Nigeria and also in the northeast and the northwest, who struggle with IGR and are very dependent on federal allocations. So it's that whole looking internally, to be able to look at your internal economies with every state and to see how you can pull up yourself and be able to make yourself attractive. But I think one of the areas I think most state governors should look at, I think some state governors like Kebbi State, for instance, they've been able to attract significant agribusiness investments, especially with the rice program, in terms of attracting rice mills and forming partnerships with Lagos State to be able to mill rice, grow rice in Kebbi, send it to Lagos where the markets are. And they themselves have also been able to attract significant investment into the states. and set up outgrower schemes. And I think that is the way forward. I mean, you have to take a look at the lead of states like Kebbi, who have agriculture as their comparative advantage and are taking advantage of it. It's also interesting, I think, Kingsley, to note that the NIPC has a pipeline of about $25 billion worth of foreign direct investment projects. The federal government of Nigeria does not have any land, and I think that is something we need to realize. So if any investment is going to come into Nigeria out of these 25 billion investments in the pipeline of investments in NIPC, it is going to go to a particular state. So each one of these states have to look at their comparative advantage and take a look at how they can attract foreign direct investments. They can take a look at the Kebbi model and see what they have done there to be able to make their state as an attractive investment destination, and also reaching out to markets like Lagos to be able to form alliances. There was another summit that was held recently between Kano State and Lagos State, which are the two largest population bases in the country. And you can see that most of these states are now beginning to look at collaboration. The Lagos State Governor, the Kano State Governor, and also the Kebbi State Governor came to Ekpe in Lagos to be able to look at how they can harmonize their trading patterns and their economies. So this is the fallout of what they say that charity begins at home, and of course necessity is the mother of invention. So if those states have not gone through this whole problem, this whole collaboration among the governors and beginning to see how they can make their states more attractive for investments would not have happened. So necessity is indeed the mother of invention. And I think that a lot of states have learnt their lesson, and a lot of states are beginning to build internal capacity, as you know, especially with the rice production. There are lots of states, Ogun State, Kebbi State, Lagos State with processing, have also started looking at how they can tie into this rice revolution we're doing in Nigeria for self-sustainability. So I think you can see that the outcome of that problem is leading to most of these governors now looking inwards for solutions. So that's a step in the right direction.
Tilewa Adebajo, we'll get back to you shortly. Let's bring in Dr. Dama here. We're talking about sub-nationals and the need for them to work together so they can move their various states forward rather than depend on the federal government. I know that most of the states are naturally endowed. We have rich mineral resources and even human capital. What should they be doing so that we move the nation forward rather than depend on allocations coming from the federal level?
Thank you very much. I think this is an issue that has bothered me severally, because I was privileged to be head of Secretariat of the National Economic Council of this country. And unfortunately, the reality is that a lot of the states do have potentials for economic prosperity. But you see, it is one thing for a state to have potentials. It is another for that potential to be transformed into a reality and source of income. Now, if you look at Lagos, if you look at Ogun State, they are situated at a point that gives them natural comparative advantage. But that notwithstanding, every single state of this country that you analyze have either a solid mineral that can be intensively developed or have agricultural potential that can be intensively also developed. But unfortunately, the reality is that in most of the states, the state governors unfortunately don't have teams. And a governor alone cannot do everything. It is the capacity of the team that any governor surround himself that will define the direction and positive economic prosperity that may come out of the states. I could remember vividly when Fashola was the governor of Lagos State. We attended a program for Harvard University, and he came up with the idea of Lagos Innovation Policy Advisory Council, and he made me a member of that Lagos Policy Advisory Council. I'm not from Lagos State. I'm not from the Southwest. I am from the North. But Fashola make me to be part of that council. Why? Because he is working dispassionately to bring an innovative idea that exists in most other developing countries, particularly Latin America, so that you will unleash the creative potential of the young people as innovators, give them some startup funding so that they can be able to do things differently. We have extremely talented Nigerians in every single local government of this country. The most important thing is for the governors, most of the governors, to rethink their team. If they cannot change their team, get their own citizens that are intellectuals everywhere, let them form like a policy advisory council so that they can give them an unbiased and objective view as to how they can make that state much better. For example, in my state, Kano, it is unfortunate, it is the biggest state in Nigeria, the state with the highest number of dams, but unfortunately, when Audu Bako and his team conceived the dams are never utilized. There was a famine in Kano in 1969, 1970. I read it in the books. I was very young. Audu Bako assembled his team. He took them to a hotel. He said that none of the commissioners or permanent secretaries will leave that hotel until they come up with a policy framework that a citizen of Kano will never go hungry in case there is no rainfall at all. And that is the genesis of the construction of the massive number of dams, which were consolidated by also the government of Abubakar. But unfortunately, the subsequent governments have abandoned that. Kano should have been a leading irrigation-oriented agriculture production center in West Africa and exporting billions of dollars worth of agricultural products. But unfortunately, we don't have the team. And that is why people cannot be able to think beyond their nose. I think the state governors need to wake up from their slumber. The time for depending on federal government is over, is over, is over. Discoveries in alternative sources of energy will make the seemingly temporary increase in the price of oil only a short-term gain. The reality is that in the future, the price of oil will certainly come down. And the future of this country will never be on oil. It will be on sustainable production of agricultural products for domestic consumption and for export. And you see, look at the potentials of what we can do. Look, a simple example, Saudi Arabia required 3 million pieces of goods. It went to Zambia, but the Zambians don't have the capacity. What are we doing as a country to be able to tap into that market? 3 million pieces of gold, and they are ready to pay $1,200 US per each single goat, which is over 70,000 naira. What are we doing? How do we organize local production to tap into agriculture and organic agricultural demand potentialities in Europe and America? I think we need to do more.
All right, Dr. Nazif Dama and Tilewa Adebajo in our Lagos Network Studios. Gentlemen, we're taking a short break now. The conversation, of course, is getting more interesting, particularly with the perspective on getting the subnationals to look more into the management of their respective economies in tandem with what is happening at the federal level by the Buhari administration. We'll take a short break now.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Thank you for staying with us. Some people have joined us via tweets in the conversation, and would like to take a couple of them. You can also be a part of it. We'll start with Mike Anyaku. He tweets, The present government has invested massively in agriculture, and we all saw the results. Agriculture has potentials of generating employment, raw materials for industries, and food security. They should sustain it and ban importation of food of any kind in the country.
All right, this other tweet is coming from Habila Kwara Zakshi. It says the most significant gain of President Buhari's administration in terms of economic development is the agricultural sector. Almost every household is engaged in one agro-allied business or the other, and is really encouraging.
Isa Shambo tweets, increase in foreign reserve is one of the major economic achievements of Buhari's administration.
And this is from Ogundele Edo. The stability in the forex market is commendable. We all witnessed how it was jumping from one figure to the other, making daily headlines. But now stability has been ensured in the last 1 year.
And Dele Jack Solomon Medj tweets, politics aside, in President Muhammadu Buhari's 3 years administration, the agricultural sector posted consistent growth levels throughout the recession, leading other sectors into positive growth rates. Nigeria saw bumper food harvests, especially in rice, which local production continues to rise significantly, with states like Ebonyi, Benue, Niger, Kebbi, Kano, Ogun, etc.
This is Amogbala Humbabs. If we must leave out politics, only the naysayers and cynics will say President Buhari has done nothing since assuming office. Even if it were to be the completion of ongoing projects left by the past administration of Goodluck Jonathan, it's a pass mark for him. That's Buhari.
And Sakiru tweets, I am convinced that one of the achievements of this government is the agricultural sector. But in Lagos, I have never eaten Nigerian rice, as smuggling is on the rise.
Festus Akimboyewa tweets, now judging from available statistics, the outlook for Nigeria's economy seemed bleak when President Buhari took over. No wonder the Naira suffered its biggest fall against the dollar, pushing up inflation. Our economy also entered the worst recession in decades. Now, through the hard work of the administration, the economy has come out of recession. The Naira is now stable, inflation is falling, and confidence in the economy has returned. There's no doubt that Buhari has done well.
Aminu Haliru says, I think I give kudos to the current administration, especially in diversifying our economy from oil-based economy, because we achieved a lot in agriculture through CBN Anchor Borrower program by producing almost 90% of rice we consumed. But the current administration needs to do more in providing adequate security to various states such as Benue, Nasarawa, Taraba, Kaduna, and Zamfara in order to encourage the farmers to produce more.
Another one from Festus Akimboyewa says the massive investment in infrastructure and agriculture should be applauded, but the government needs to invest more in human capital development and job creation projects across the country.
Victor Ohiosuma tweets, the Buhari government has considerably improved the economy. The agricultural revolution, especially in rice production, is great. Also, the increase in internally generated revenue by FIRS, customs, and others. More needs to be done in development of solid minerals to reap the benefits.
Change to progress. That's the Twitter handle of this next contributor. It's clear from the efforts in the past 3 years that we aren't where we should be, but definitely we're on the right path. Now, taxpayers' numbers have increased, TSA and BVN fully implemented, which has blocked leakages, and IPPS implementation has also helped to remove ghost workers. It can only get better for us.
Now, Sani Michael Omakoji tweets, while we acknowledge the efforts of President Muhammadu Buhari's led administration to fulfill his electioneering promises in the area of diversification, we should not deceive ourselves that an average Nigerian is still living below $1.
All right, those are the tweets that we have. Just before we move into another sub-topic in discussing the economy, I just, based on the point that Dr. Nazib Dama was pursuing with regard to the role of subnational governments, which Tilewa in Lagos also touched on. I'm wondering, let's put this perhaps in proper context. When we say we have millions, tens of millions of unemployed youths, you don't find all of them in the Federal Capital Territory. You find them in the states. Then when we're also looking at the numbers, you know, whether the rate of inflation, the rate of forex, or the productive capacity, for the growth of the economy, all of this would sometimes we need to generate from the subnational levels. What, in your opinion, can the appropriate institutions do to focus the attention of the subnationals on this? I'm speaking in particular of the National Economic Council, rather than, you know, sometimes some of the things or the statements you hear about what the exactions are there. You know, you were at the National Planning Commission, which serves as the Secretariat for the National Economic Council. How can we refocus the National Economic Council, or how can the National Economic Council refocus itself so that at the end of the day, both the federal and the subnationals are on the same page? And once, of course, you can do that, then we can expect a spike in the growth rate of the economy.
Well, as I've said earlier, Kingsley, the reality is that as a developing economy, we need to first go back to the culture of medium-term national development planning. Because with the national development planning culture, you will be able to encapsulate every single sectoral need right from the federal government level up to the local government level. The government also needs to take issues of economic management serious. It is an abnormality in the last 19 years. This is the only government that does not have a national economic advisor. The role of the chief economic advisor of the government is to provide overall economic policy coordination between the federal government, the state government, and the local government, interface with the National Planning Commission, and interface with the Federal Ministry of Finance to make sure that every single action we take in one sector, because look, the reality is that economic management is based on interdependencies and complementarities. One action in one sector of the economy will provide the needed impetus for actions in other sectors. And that if one section of the economy is not right, then the other section cannot right. But importantly, the constitution of this country has vested powers on the president, has also vested powers on the state governors. And the form or the forum with which coordinated national economic policy decisions and actions are taken is the National Economic Council. But unfortunately, if you don't have the culture of national development planning, what is the National Economic Council discussing? It's essentially to provide a framework for the implementation of the actions completely defined within the 5-year time period. Others have done it. Those that did it, they are not spirits, they are ordinary human beings. Why is it difficult that we cannot be able to go back to that culture? But going back to my earlier points about the state governors doing things differently, the president is trying his own best. He has his team, but the governors, believe me sincerely, a lot of the governors are simply waiting to come to Abuja after park meeting and collect money. For example, my state, I'm from Kano. What business does Kano State have to rely on 7 billion, partly 7 billion collected from the Federation account? When we did 18 million citizens of Kano divided by average of 7 billion, every citizen of Kano per capita is collecting 320 something naira. That is not money. That is not money at all. And you can be able to do this analysis and reflect it in virtually most of the states. So the reality is that the state governors must work independently and assume there is no oil in this country. So that at the end of the day, it will enable them to put their thinking caps and do rightly. Now, challenge any state governor today to give you the statistics of mechanics in his state, he will not be able to tell you. To tell you the number of farmers in his state, he may not be able to tell you. But every state has Ministry of Trade and Cooperative. And this is the platform within which you can be able to collect important data. And once you collect that data, it will give you the signal or the requirements sector by sector of what you need to do. And then you assemble a team of the citizens of the state, patriotic enough to help you provide a direction, so that at the end of the day, once anybody realizes that you are serious, you have data, you have defined developmental intervention needs across sectors, you have costed it based on your state medium-term plan, you have indicated your potential resource plus, people will come, put in their money because they know you are serious. As the state governors waiting for the federal government to go and undertake simplistic statistics collection for them to define their developmental direction, it's not the responsibility of the federal government. It is the responsibility of the states. And I said earlier, every single state, and I challenge the governors, every single state that you take can be able to develop one single sector of the economy, whether solid minerals, whether agriculture. Look, for example, in the north, you have littoral states that are bordering Niger Republic and Chad Republic. Now, these are states that even if they don't have agricultural or solid mineral potentialities, can they be able to develop a framework for sustainable alternative energy development through solar and massive windmill so that they can sell it to the federal government and other states and even neighboring states? These are potentials. But everyone will come to Abuja, collect poverty-inducing allocation. That is what I call it.
All right, Dr. Nasif Dama, thank you very much. You raised a number of points, but just one slight correction. The government, the federal government, Buhari administration, has an economic advisor. We've had him on the program a number of times. He's a doctor, he's also an ambassador. Joy, you have a question for...
Yes, I want us to bring in Mr. Tilewa Adebajo at this point. Here we are talking about the economy in the last 3 years, and we're talking about the progress made from the federal level and the need to get the states to do their part in terms of sustainability and attracting more investment into the country. Now, what is your take on the need for governors to do more, to come up with better policies that can engage the teeming population in their states to move us forward?
Thank you very much, Joy. As I said earlier, the federal government of Nigeria does not have any land. Most of the intervention is done at the state levels, and all the population of Nigeria lives in the states, the various states of the republic. So I think the role of the governors before has not really been on the forefront. Everybody has always looked to the center. And I think that we are beginning to see this paradigm shift whereby governors are beginning to take the lead. Like I said earlier, I'd mentioned to you the Kebbi model. You know, before the governor in Kebbi came in, no one had thought about the potential of that state. But all of a sudden, he came in and he put in processes in place, and before you know what was happening, he's attracting a lot of the investments, tying into a federal government program of import substitution with rice. So I think we've touched on that reality, and I think there's no question about that, that the intervention needs to take place. One of the things we've not talked about is unemployment. Unemployment is still a very massive problem in Nigeria. We have between 25 to 35% unemployment, and depending on the demography within the youths is a lot higher. And I think this is something that still needs to be addressed. We also need to get the central bank, apart from financial stability, to be able to take a look at unemployment as one of its key performance indicators to take a look at, because most of the unemployment you see in this country is at the state levels, and it is the governors that have to deal with it. And I think it's good now that attention is shifting not only from the federal, but at least everybody is beginning to take a look at the states. So the states have a significant role to play, because that is really where the intervention in the economy is taking place. And I think what the prof said, I think that struck me was the fact that it's important that you have not only a sustainable policy, but also the coordination of these policies, because what the federal government is doing at federal level, the people in the states must also understand it, so that the intervention and the objective and the purposeful implementation of any policies is properly done. So there's no point in the federal government trying to do a particular policy, and the governors on the states who are responsible for implementation and closer to the people are working in a different direction. It's not going to work. So it's important that both the coordination and implementation and the harmonization between the federal, the state governments, and of course the local governments, I think is all in harmony. And I think we're beginning to see a lot more of this, like I've said, with meetings with the Lagos State Governor, the Kebbi State Governor, and of course the Kano State Governor, coming together to take a look at projects and seeing how they can take care of all their comparative advantages. So, like I said, it's a positive step, but it's something that is important if we want to be able to push development into Nigeria. And we also have to know that our population of 200 million can either be an asset or liability. If we cannot grow our economy at least 3% or more, this population is going to become a liability. And that is going to be the problem of the state governments, because they are the ones closest to the population.
Tilewa Adebajo, thank you very much. But I still want to stay with you and then move on to another area. Well, some observers of the polity have drawn attention to the country's debt profile. As we all know, Nigeria was able to exit the stranglehold of the creditors over 10 years ago. But some concerns have been raised as to whether or not the country is in a position to manage its growing debt profile, especially the foreign component of it. What's your take on this?
Well, we don't really have a debt. We don't have a debt crisis, or we don't have a debt issue. And I think that the last year was when we had an issue with our debt management. And when the IMF Article 4 consultations took place, there was a red flag on that, because we were spending about 65% of our revenues to service debt, which clearly is not sustainable. A year later, I think that has now reduced to about 40%, and I think is on the way down. What the federal government has been trying to do with the debt is to shift the debt from more of domestic debt, which was denominated in Naira and was more expensive. They're shifting a lot more into dollars, which is cheaper to borrow. So they're shifting the debt portfolio to be able to reduce how much we're going to spend to service our debt. And I think that that is in the process, and hopefully by the end of this year, they can bring debt service to a sustainable level. People talk about debt to GDP ratios. I don't believe in debt to GDP ratio, because a country like America has debt to GDP ratio of over 100%. But the United States of America only uses 8% of its revenues to service its debt. So clearly that is a sustainable number. Last year it was costing us about 66%, as I said, but now we've reduced it from this budget to about 30. So as long as we have a sustainable debt model, and I think we have a very good debt management office that their own job is to keep a tab on these levels. And of course, we also have a Fiscal Responsibility Act, which limits what government can do. So not only do we have the safety net, but we also have the laws in place that will not allow government to overborrow and put the government into jeopardy. So in terms of debt management, the laws protect Nigerians, and also we have a good debt management office that protects us. But again, like we've said, the reduction in the treasury bill rates, I think has reduced from 18% last year to about 10% now, has reduced the repayment burden on the government. So right now, in terms of debt management and sustainability, I think we're still okay. That is really not where the problem is. In fact, if we can borrow more to be able to put into sustainable projects such as infrastructure, it benefits the country on the long run. So debt as a tool, it depends on how you use it. If you use debt properly, then it's okay. But if you borrow money to pay salaries and to pay your recurrent side of the project, that doesn't work quite well. So I don't think we have a debt problem. I think it's just a debt management issue and a portfolio issue. And I think that we should be able to resolve that and put more policies in place. The problem of Nigeria is growth. GDP and our economy is not growing, is growing less than our population growth. That is what we really need to address.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tilewa Adebajo. We'll come to you shortly. Back to Dr. Dama in our studio here. Looking at our debt portfolio in terms of management, from your own perspective, how have we fared in that regard?
Well, certainly, as a country, our debt profile after the exit from the Paris Club some years ago, I think we have witnessed uncomfortable expansion in the debt profile, which is not too good, particularly if you analyze it in the context of the disproportionately high internal debt, which goes a long way to squeeze or crowd out domestic borrowers. But the bond rate that is issued, whether short, medium, or long term, that varies between 12 to 18%, I think is a disproportionately high cost for Nigerians to borrow. And everywhere in the world, debt as a developmental financing strategy is not sustainable. What we need to do as a country, as I have said 3 years ago, I am saying it and I will continue to say it, is let us look at our public-private partnership policy, change that policy, institutionalize a more transparent framework for delivering public-private partnership projects, sit down across the board, particularly between the federal and state government, agree on a realistic public sector expenditure costing that is economically realistic and resource optimal in nature. People will bring so much money to this country because every single sector you take in the economy, particularly infrastructure, infrastructural projects and investment are self-liquidating projects. So rather than using debt towards financing them, can't we go into public-private partnerships so that the build, operate, transfer, build, operate, or whatever model we are going to use will significantly deliver much infrastructural projects, but at an extremely lower cost, so that debt will be used only as a last resort measure toward financing critical issues that cannot be provided for or delivered through public-private partnerships. The Indians have succeeded in doing that. In the last planning cycle of India, which started from 2013 to 2018, they were able to attract $1 trillion in public-private partnership. As I've said earlier, it is not that people like the pace of Indians. The potentials and the economic dynamics of India in terms of being a very strong market in Asia, Nigeria also have that economic potential in being the biggest market in Africa. And investment is usually attracted where markets exist or future potentials of newer markets to be created. So we have the market. All that we need to do, sit down, let us agree as citizens, as elite. The problem of this country is not ordinary people. It is the elites across the board, across the religions, across ethnicities that are refusing to do what is right at the right time, so that at the end of the day, we could have achieved much better than we are achieving. Because as Tiliwa has said, and as other economists have said, it is really impossible for us to achieve any meaningful progress with 1%, 2% growth rate. We need to grow the economy at least 6 to 10%. But that growth cannot be provided for by the efforts of the federal government alone. It must be an all-encompassing effort, particularly complementary and diverse economic policies and initiatives on the part of the state governments and even local governments that are likely to be centers of economic excellence and prosperity, so that we are operating one single economy with one single macroeconomic dynamics and variables. If we work as a team collectively, this country could have achieved much what it can achieve. And to us, diffusing the time bomb, the ticking time bomb on massive youth unemployment that number over 40 million in this country, I think it should make us to put our thinking cap to do what is right differently.
Dr. Nazif Dama, thank you very much. Let's return to Lagos Network Studios. Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, of course, we're pressed for time now. Very quickly, the whole purpose of economic management, ultimately, is citizen welfare and happiness. What, in your opinion, is required to be done to further boost the feel-good factor of the citizens as a direct consequence, positive consequence, of economic management?
Thank you very much. What I just wanted to do was to just follow up on something Prof said before I answer that question. And I think that he's spot on when he talks about engaging the private sector to be able to match whatever efforts government is making. And the government is also, we now have a deficit in our budget, and that needs to be financed also. But the importance of private sector partnership and getting the private sector engaged saves the government a lot of money, and that's a model that I think we need to look at. And I think I want to concur with what he said in that area, and to be able to get government to do that. And I think in answering your question, I think one of the most important things is to get private sector involvement. As I said earlier, there is a pipeline that the NIPC has put together about $25 billion worth of projects that wants to come into Nigeria or wants to be able to go there. But where is this going to go, and how much of this $24 billion can actually come into Nigeria? So I think what is important that the government needs to do is the fact that they need to understand, first of all, why did the economy go into a recession in the first place? From a growth of 6.5% to about minus 2.3. That's important, that to be able to keep your hands on the pulse of the economy. It's very important that we do that. Send out the right signals, which they have done with the Economic Recovery Growth Plan. And more or less going forward, consistency in policy formulation. The issue of being able to have policies that are sustainable and people understand what you're doing. You've talked about ease of doing business. But I think one of the biggest challenges we have in this country today, I think, is the security situation. Without a doubt, all the foreign investors we talk to are very concerned about the security situation in this country. And I think that if we can get that out of the news and get that out of the framework, then we can improve business confidence. Business confidence, I think, is something that is not tangible. I mean, it's not an economic indicator, but it's something that is there that you need to deal with. And if we can address these issues and we can put a positive spin to our economy, to what we're doing, and gain the confidence of first of all, Nigerian business people, then the international business people will follow. The portfolio investors are already back in the markets, but we also need to converge the foreign exchange rate and to have it market driven. So our policies also need to be right. And I think once we get our policies right, we get the security situation and the business environment right. The Economic Recovery Growth Plan, yes, it's a good documentation. People know which direction we're going. So the next stage now is implement that plan. We've seen a downfall in a contraction in GDP growth. Tweak that plan, ensure that the stimulus is sustained, and of course, address the security situation. And I think, without a doubt, the rest will follow. But my take is the fact that for me, there are two critical things. Unemployment is high, and our population of 200 million, we need to ensure that population does not become a liability, but remains an asset. And the only way we can do that is to ensure that our GDP growth exceeds the rate of our GDP growth exceeds the rate of our population growth, which currently starts at 3%. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, always a delight having you on Good Morning Nigeria. You've joined us from our Lagos Network studios today. Thanks a lot for your insight. Thanks a lot for your insight.
Kingsley, and thank you, Joy. And also thank you, Prof.
Right. Well, we'll also double appreciate Dr. Nazif Dama, Associate Professor of Economics, University of Abuja. Thanks a lot for your contribution to our discussion.
Thank you, Kingsley, and I wish the best for all Nigerians in the years to come.
All right. Well, so that does it for our conversation. Let's take a short break now. When we return, it will be closing time for us.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
The Nigerian Television Authority News 24 channel, your dependable all-round news station, offering you world-class news programs, documentaries, spotlights, promos, and information highlights. Take advantage of our network reach and advertise your interest, goods and services with us. NTA News 24, first among equals with digital broadcasting. You can reach us on Channel 21 Terrestrial TV and Channel 101 on the StarTimes platform. For more inquiries, please call Coretta 0803 618 9986 or Henry on 0803 379 0884. Join us today.
Thank you for staying with us, and good morning, Nigeria. Now, for details of happenings in the world of sports, let's go to our sports desk.